All right, we are now recording. Okay, so let's start this. Exam 1 revision guide. Look over the presentation slides on Blackboard and gather knowledge from the discussions in class to know the following. The 6 nutrients in our diet. Who wants to get that easy one?
Carbs, proteins, fats, vitamins, minerals, and water.
Good job. Hopefully everyone got that. Our macronutrients, protein, carbs, fats. Our micronutrients, vitamins and minerals, and then water, the 6th nutrient. How to calculate calories in food. How do we do that?
I said food, please. Fucking jackass.
If I've got or any food item, if I've got a granola bar in my hand, and I look at how many carbohydrates, how many protein, how many fat, what's the ingredients, how do I know how many calories are in it by knowing what's in it?
Depending on the macronutrients.
Yeah, good stuff. So what is the gram or calorie value per gram of macronutrient?
4 for carbohydrates, 4 for proteins, and 9 for fats.
That's right. So make sure that you are aware of that and can do that calculation. You won't be having a calculator in this exam, but the math will be pretty simple that I'll get you to do on this. So if I give you some examples of values, protein values, carb value, fat value, and you have to figure out how many calories that equates to. So doing a simple calculation of 4 times everything for carbs, 4 times everything for protein, 9 times everything for fats, and add them together. I will do easy numbers for you to do that, but you've got to have an understanding of how you get to that. So we can calculate calories, but what is a calorie?
Amount of energy required to heat 1 milliliter of water by 1 degree.
That's exactly right. Yeah. So a calorie is 1 milliliter of water. A kilocalorie is 1 liter of water up that 1 degree. Okay. Does anyone know what it equates to in joules? So actual terms of electrical current. So the energy it holds 4.186 joules. So every calorie is 4.186 joules. That's how we figure out how much power you're producing when we do it on our cardio machines, and it tells you you burnt this many calories. That's because you're burnt as the machine is working, it knows how much power it's using, and you're generating that power. So it knows how many calories you've used to create that power and how many you've therefore burned. Okay, functions of macronutrients. Who wants to start with this one? What is a function of any one of our macronutrients?
And like they do a protein sparing and all that.
Carbs are protein sparing. Did I hear?
Yeah, and energy source, like our main energy source.
Absolutely, yeah. Carbohydrates, the main thing that they're energy, right? They are kind of anti-catabolic. You know, they spare that protein that could be used for energy if they weren't ingested. Carbs also has, it's starch, but it's also fiber. So one of the functions of carbohydrates is to get our fiber in our diet. That's pretty much it for carbohydrates. Energy, high intensity energy, glycolysis, and it's fiber. So other than that, there isn't much more function that carbohydrate does for us. What about the other 2 macronutrients? What about protein? What does protein do for us?
Doesn't protein help rebuild muscle tissue after
Absolutely.
working out?
Yeah, replenishes tissue, right? Repairs and replenishes tissues. Cool. What else does it do?
it's still technically an energy source too, but it's not our primary one.
Right, yep, it's still an energy source.
Transportation,
Transport, good stuff.
hormone productions,
Yep. You say hormone or do you say,
hormone,
yeah, hormone production? Yep, absolutely. What else? There's a couple more things that protein does for us.
Acid base regulation.
Yeah, the acid base, so it helps to kind of buffer and balance out the acidity in our body. So that goes again into that transport. I brought that up in lectures, but that transport aspect, it not only transports nutrients within protein, it not only transports fats, but also buffers and transports byproducts, metabolites in and out of cells. So, yeah, moving things around. And then the last kind of thing there would be your immune system. So helping to boost your immune system, getting those T cells. Those are required for a protein are required to boost that immune system. Okay, so moving on to fats. What the function of fat?
Vitamin absorptions.
Yeah, okay, fat soluble vitamin absorption. Yeah, A, D, E, and K. So fat soluble.
It also provides structure to cells.
It does.
Provide insulation to the body.
Yeah, keeps you warm.
Precursor for hormones.
It is, yeah. We got protein hormones we mentioned, but we also got lipid hormones, fat hormones. Those are generally our sex or cholesterol-based hormones. Here's some big ones. What's the big part about fat? What the biggest role fat has? I don't think anyone said it yet.
Does it involve energy?
It is.
Like,
it's your energy production,
it-
right?
Yeah, ATP production.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely right. Yeah, that's what we're using right now. Remember, that's majority of the time we're aerobically using oxygen, burning fat storage to maintain energy and ATP production. Okay, so we've got a lot of things listed. A couple that we haven't got yet. Why else might we eat fat? What role does it play? Why does the majority of the population eat fat? Not for the functions we've listed yet. Why is it so highly consumed?
Because it's cheap and fills you up fast.
Okay, close. So function would be it tastes good. Okay, it has it gives flavor and it has a great taste, and that's majority of the reason why we eat so much of it as a human race. But we're evolved to store it pretty well. Okay, because it does give us so much energy. It's responsible for our hair and our skin and our nails and how kind of nourished those are and how beautiful they can be. Okay, fat has a role in that. And then our hunger. Yeah, fat has a role in keeping us full. And it takes time to break it down. So it keeps us fuller for longer, kind of slows down that GI tract movement and keeps us full. Okay, so then moving on to metabolism of our macronutrients. I've got some bullet points here under that. And it says the breakdown, the enzymes, the substrates I wanted to add in there too, the acids, the transporters or the transporter gates, which goes into the diffusion types, and the speed at which that those all happen. Okay, so this is quite a big part. There's lots happening here. So let's start again with, we started with carbohydrates. Let's go on carbohydrates. What are the breakdown of carbohydrates?
Start in your mouth.
Say it again.
It starts in your mouth.
It does. And you're right, amylase in saliva is one of the enzymes. That would be under the enzyme bullet point. but okay, once that the enzymes and the hydrochloric acid within the stomach have interacted with it, what is the actual breakdown? What are the substrates that come from carbohydrate sources? What do carbs break down into? How do we use them?
Glucose.
Glucose.
Right,
Glucose more.
good. Okay, so it can start as, we've got those chain lengths that we talk about with, could be polysaccharide, oligosaccharide, disaccharide, and the enzymes have that role, breaking them down into monosaccharides, glucose, fructose, or galactose. Okay, but we only use glucose. We store it as glycogen. So those are kind of once you've broken it all down, you've got glucose or glycogen. Okay, so keep moving through. We kind of said some of that. So the breakdown, what does carbohydrates go through to actually use glucose, the breakdown into energy? What's that energy system called?
Glycolysis.
Glycolysis, good. So that's the breakdown part, taking glucose into ATP. And we use enzymes, as you mentioned, through the whole GI tract. It starts in the mouth with the amylase. We swallow that and we get the hydrochloric acid, which is acids listed there too. So hydrochloric acid in the stomach. What other enzymes are there that have a role on carbohydrates or glucose?
Pancreatic amylase.
Yeah, the pancreas releases an amylase too. Good. What else?
Insulin.
Insulin is a hormone, so we list that in there. It's good to know. It helps us absorb. It makes us anabolic, right? It helps us store the glucose once it's in the blood and put it into cells. But that's not an enzyme. Anyone remember the brush border disaccharates? Remember that on the microvilli of our intestine, those hair-like structures that have enzymes on them that help break down some of our disaccharides into monosaccharides.
Lactase. Spanish is called lactasa and maltasa.
Yes, so those are the enzymes that break down the disaccharides. So maltase for maltose and lactase for lactose. That's great job. Okay, so the enzymes, acid, we've talked about it. Transporters. What's some transporters that are used for glucose? How do we get those into the body when they're going through the intestinal wall? There's some, and it goes into diffusion types too.
It
Sorry.
would be GLUT1 and GLUT4.
Yes, so glucose transporter 1, glucose transporter 4 are the common ones that are used. And that's into the cell, but we got to get it into the body first. So that's the sodium glucose transporter, so sGLUT1. So knowing sGLUT meaning sodium glucose transporter, and then GLUT, which is glucose transporters. 1 and 4 are the predominantly the main ones that we'll see in muscle cells. And those are diffusions, right? These are transporters or gates. And so that allows for different types of diffusion. Do you remember what the different types of diffusion we went through, the 4 different types? Alcohol in the stomach is what type of diffusion?
Passive.
It's passive. So it just goes through the membrane, just soaks through. Again, that's why we say we get drunk if you drink alcohol with an empty stomach. Okay. Then what? Okay, you got passive. What else do we have?
Active transport.
We have active transport, and that's how glucose and galactose get through. Okay, they're actively transported with sGLUT1, sodium glucose transporter 1. Okay, so if glucose and galactose are the monosaccharides that get through active, so then remember, how does fructose get through?
Facilitated diffusion.
Right, good. It's facilitated. There's a gate, but it doesn't require any energy. And then the other one is the endocytosis, which we didn't really cover yet in this class. So don't have to worry too much about endocytosis. Speed. I want to talk about speed of transport. Okay. Roughly how long does it take to get carbohydrates into the blood? How's our absorption with that?
Was it 1 to 4 hours?
That's how quickly the stomach empties. So yes, but like we can get better answer than that. Think about the recommendations of how much carbohydrate you should consume during exercise. Do you remember any of that? It's linked. You have to kind of read between the lines there.
Depending of the glycemic index, no?
It would. You're absolutely right. It would depend on the glycemic index. So the high glycemic index means it would get into the blood quicker, release quicker, and the low glycemic index means it takes a little longer. And so you're absolutely right. It depends on that index. So if we have a fast glycemic index, what's the quickest we can do that? We use carbohydrates. The recommendation is about 60 grams an hour. So if you break that down per minute, it's about a gram a minute that we actually have carbohydrate absorption. Gram a minute. Okay, good. We talked carbs. Let's shuttle back to the top there. Let's talk about protein. What do proteins get broken down to?
Amino acids.
Good job. So again, you've got the whole polypeptide broken down into smaller amino acid chains, and that's where you end up with the single amino acids. But di and tripeptides are still a thing too, but yeah, we get back down to that amino acid. And how do they get broken down? So they, we don't really want to use them for energy, so they can go through a process. What's the process called when you create a glucose out of an amino acid? If you wanted to use it for energy.
Gluconeogenesis.
Correct, yeah. Gluconeogenesis, the production of a glucose molecule from a non-carbohydrate source. So that's how we would use it for energy. Again, we don't like to do that, so let's move on. What enzymes break down protein?
Pepsin,
Pepsin, yep,
peptidases, yeah,
yep,
and proteases.
yeah, protease, yep. Good job. Nothing in the saliva, remember. Got the hydrochloric acid, still the same we talked about with the carbs, that's in the stomach. But then, yeah, your pepsins, your proteases, your peptidase, those are the enzymes that work on our proteins. Individual amino acids, remember they are actively transported as well. So the transport to get individual amino acid is active transport through the intestinal wall. Diffusion will be active, and speed we haven't got listed. Okay, fat. What are fat? What's primarily? Okay, what are the 3 types of fat that we talked about in this class?
Triglycerides,
Yep.
lipids,
Lipid and sterile.
Sterols, so cholesterol, phospholipids, and cholesterol. Good. And triglycerides, sorry. Yeah. Okay, so we have triglycerides. What do we break triglycerides down into? What is a triglyceride?
You break it down to diglyceride.
Okay, and what do you have if you have a diglyceride from a triglyceride? You must have something separate, right?
Free fatty acid.
Fatty acid.
Good, free fatty acid. Okay, so we're breaking those down into the fatty acid chains, and we can get those in long, medium, and short. Does anyone remember the number of links?
2 to 4 for short, 6 to 10 for medium, and then more than 12 is long.
Yeah, good job. Good. And they go through what process to actually create ATP?
Beta oxidation.
Beta oxidation. Good. Yeah, we start carving those carbon chains off 2 by 2. They go through the Krebs cycle and we get ATP production. Okay, good. Absorption, transport, enzymes for lipids or fats. What ones do we have? Enzyme in the mouth.
Lingual lipase.
Yep, lipases, right? Lingual from the mouth. We also get gastric lipase from the stomach being released from the chief cells. We get hormone sensitive lipases that break down our fat that's from in the muscle cell when we actually use it. But yeah, we get lots of different enzymes that are being used to break down fat. Some of them don't interact with fat very well because they're hydrophobic. Remember, fats don't like water, and enzymes are water-based within the blood. So what things do we need to interact with fat in the intestines?
Proteins.
Protein, protein as in enzymes, but if those enzymes can't interact, how does the body get interaction with fat molecules?
With help of bile.
Bile, right? They're emulsifiers. So bile and bile salt helps to kind of grit and pick up the fat and create, remember these micelles that they create, they surround the fat globule with salt, and they're transported into the intestinal wall, and then they deposit all the fat, and then they recreate the chylomicrons, and then they are transported into the body through chylomicrons. And yeah, so if you're not familiar with all that, check out those slides, make sure you are. We get, those are the long chain fatty acids and monoglycerides that have that. And then you've got the medium and short chain triglycerides and the glycerol that can be facilitated through. Okay, they're not transported the same way. Okay, let's move on. Components of the GI tract. We talked about the mouth already. That's the first one. What's after the mouth?
Stomach.
Throat.
Yeah, your esophagus here, where breathing and food kind of separates. Okay, then we got the stomach. I heard someone say. So what's after the stomach?
Duodenum.
Duodenum, first part of the small intestine. It's good. Then
Small intestine.
yeah, jejunum and ileum, the other two parts of the small intestine. We've also got the pancreas that plays a role there, right? The pancreas adds in different enzymes and hormones. Okay, and then we've got the large intestines. Okay, ascending, transverse, descending towards the rectum, and then that's the end. How long is the GI tract?
25 feet.
25 feet,
25
right?
feet.
Long tube inside your body. And remember, nothing is actually inside your body until it gets to the intestinal wall. So that's all about that breakdown, making it into tiny, tiny particles, and then getting that transport into the cell wall and then into the body. Good stuff. The fates of those macronutrients once ingested. Okay, so if we ingest carbohydrates, where can it go? What's the end fate for carbohydrate?
Store it as glycogen.
Yep, you can store it as glycogen for future use. Good.
Store it as energy.
Yeah, you can use it.
Fat.
It's fat, right? I mean, in excessive amounts, if your glycogen stores are full and you're still eating more carbohydrate, you're not gonna be able to store it. And so the body does a few things to either use it or get rid of it. One of the things that it will do is use that, it'll create the glycerol backbone of triglycerides. And so when the fatty deposits get transported through the blood, they can connect to that glycerol backbone and store as a triglyceride again inside muscle cell. So glucose can be used to store fat. Yeah. And it doesn't become fat, it gets used in the storage of fat. Okay, what else? Stored as fat, or
Energy source.
used as the energy source, right? Glycolysis, good. Or anaerobic or aerobic glycolysis in the Krebs cycle. Okay, what happens about protein then? So protein gets consumed. What is the end fate for protein?
Do you also have glycogen storage?
We talked about glycogen, that was in the carbohydrate. So what about protein? What happens to these amino acids when they get into your blood? What happens?
Repairs.
Sorry?
Repairs like your tissues.
So it can be used, right? It can be sequenced. Remember, it can go into those cells and you can get that transcription occurring. Okay, when we go into the nucleus of the cell, you've got your DNA. In those DNA, you get your genes. Those are the instructions. You have a job that those amino acids need to do. They're transcribed, messenger RNA to the ribosome. Ribosome transcribes them. And then if you need to collect any more, then you get that tRNA, the translation, pulling them in together to get this new protein created. So that's the main thing that will happen with amino acids. They can obviously be used for energy if they need to be. And that's, transporting them to the liver, undergoing gluconeogenesis, becoming a carbohydrate, and then being used that way. So that's another fate that could happen to amino acid. Okay, what about fat? What's the fate of fat?
They turn into adipose tissue.
Yeah, it can be stored again, mainly as a triglyceride in subcutaneous fat, right? It can store in body fat. You don't have to store it though. What could you do with it?
Use it as energy.
You can use it as energy. Good job. Mainly the two things that happen with fat. You either use it or store it for later. Okay. Obviously, different types of fats. So we're talking cholesterol. You can do other things. You can make hormones with them. There are more roles. We talked about functions already, but when we're talking about fates of ingestion, kind of where does it end up going before we utilize it? Okay, we've got hormone role. Okay. This is diabetes. Sorry, I missed it. How many types of diabetes are there?
Two.
Two, good. What's type 1?
Pancreatic dysfunction.
Yep. You don't produce insulin. No production. What's type 2?
Insulin
Insulin.
insensitivity.
Right. Insulin's produced, you're not sensitive to it. So you habitualize to the mass amounts that are being produced. Early as 13 years of age, teenagers are starting to get diabetes now. They used to think it takes 20 years to get diabetes type 2. Not the case. It's all about how much sugar you're ingesting. And that's that high GI sugar, the quick sugar. Okay, so 2 types. Good job. Any energy used for mechanical work? What energy is the whole point of our energy systems? What do we get to? What do we actually use?
ATP.
Good. Good. And we produce that with 3 different energy systems. Okay. And that's kind of going into the next bullet point anyway. How do we create this ATP?
with the phosphagen system,
Phosphagen
aerobic
system,
or anaerobic system.
anaerobic system,
An aerobic.
and aerobic system. Good. 3 different systems. I want you to know, this, like it says there, bullet points, the speed of them. Which one's the quickest?
Phosphagen,
Which one's the slowest?
Aerobic.
aerobic,
Good. Okay, so you know which one's fast and slow. We know the timing. Okay, 3 to 15 seconds for phosphagen. 15, 30 seconds to 3 minutes for anaerobic, greater than 3 minutes for aerobic. That's when the majority of our energy being produced is coming from those systems. There is some overlap, but those are the general rules that we're going to be mainly using that system and create energy at that intensity during those time intervals.
What were those time intervals again? It was like 3 to 15 seconds for phosphagen. And then what was aerobic?
Yeah, anaerobic is generally seen as 30 seconds to 3 minutes. But again, there's a break between 15 and 30 when you're talking phosphagen to anaerobic. So they have overlap, it's just the sole contributor in those 2 systems is those timings. Okay, so there is some fudge and wiggle room there that's both energy systems are interplaying, but that's kind of what they say. 3 to 15 seconds, 30 to 3 minutes, and greater than 3 minutes. Okay, what are the inputs to these systems? Okay, what is put in to get energy or ATP out?
ATP as well.
Say that again.
You put in glucose and ATP.
Okay, so glucose is inputted into glycolysis, the anaerobic system. Okay, glucose could be inputted or glycogen, remember storage form. You actually get more ATP produced if you have glycogen, not glucose being used. What's the inputs for the phosphagen system?
Creatine.
Creatine, yeah, good. Yeah, and then the byproduct of ATP use is ADP, right? And you can phosphorylate them together with adenylate kinase. So you get ADP and ADP combined together to get an ATP and an AMP, triphosphate and a monophosphate. So knowing, understanding those inputs. For the aerobic system, okay, you can have carbs, fat, or protein going into the aerobic system. So the inputs could be glucose at the very top, going down to pyruvate, and then into acetyl-CoA into the Krebs cycle. Or it could be an amino acid that goes into the Krebs cycle. Or it could be a lipid that is going into the Krebs cycle. Okay? Through beta oxidation and those carbohydrates and acetyl-CoA. But acetyl-CoA is the first entry point into the Krebs cycle. So knowing acetyl-CoA there as an input. What other things are happening? What are the outputs? What are the things that come out? Obviously, ATP is an output, right? What else is produced?
water,
NAH and the other one. I don't remember.
NADH and FADH2. So those are our hydrogen receptors that take the hydrogen ions, the acid, to the electron transport chain to interact with oxygen, right? So those are kind of NAD and FAD are kind of reactions or even inputs. They come into the system, they pick up the hydrogens, and then they take it out as NADH and FADH2. What could end in glycolysis? What's the end result of glycolysis?
Lactate acid.
Could be lactate, could be lactic acid, yeah. That's if it's quick, if it's rapid glycolysis, ends as lactic acid, okay? What is it if it's slow glycolysis and it goes on to the Krebs cycle? What's the end, before it gets to acetyl-CoA, what's the last step of the Krebs, of the glycolysis?
pyruvate,
Pyruvate, good. Yeah.
sorry for the
Okay.
pronunciation.
Sorry?
Sorry for the pronunciation.
I don't know if I'm completely hearing what you're saying.
That I'm sorry for the pronunciation.
Oh, you're absolutely fine. I got an accent too. Okay. I think we've covered a lot of it. Okay. Obviously, the aerobic system is more complex. It's larger. I'm not going to get you to memorize it. I just want you to know information about it. The anaerobic system, glycolysis, is a little bit shorter. It's only 12 steps, 10 reactions. So knowing familiar with that, the inputs and outputs. And then the phosphagen system, the quickest one, it's pretty small. There's only 2 reactions that can happen. So know all of the phosphagen. It's really quite simple. If I'm going to get a question, I'm going to pick on it. I'm going to go with the easy one. So know your phosphagen system pretty well and know those reactions and the enzymes that create those reactions, okay? We've already mentioned this, gluconeogenesis. That's when we take a non-carbohydrate substrate, so an amino acid or a fat or something, and we make it into lactate even, and we make it into glucose, and that happens in the liver. Okay, that is gluconeogenesis. The acronyms and the populations they account for. So I've got RDAs, EAR, and AMDR. What is an EAR?
I'm sorry, can you repeat gluconeogenesis? I think you were frozen for a little bit.
Oh, okay. Gluconeogenesis is taking a non-carbohydrate substrate and making it glucose. Okay, so it could be an amino acid, it could be lactate, and in the liver, it undergoes gluconeogenesis and becomes glucose and can be used for energy. And the body that's why we can live without carbohydrate consumption, because our body can produce carbohydrates. It can produce glucose on its own. We don't need to eat all the sugar. But back to the acronyms. What does EAR stand for?
Estimated average.
Yeah, estimated average requirement. And what population does that account for?
General
50%. Yeah. General.
Yeah, 50%. General pop, 50%. Okay, what's RDA then?
Recommended daily allowance.
Recommended daily allowance. And what population?
97.
97.5.
97.5. Good job. And what's the AMDR?
Acceptable macrodistribution range.
Good. The percent of your diet that should come from that macronutrient. So carbohydrates, what are those numbers since we're there? What's the carbohydrate AMDR?
45,
45 to
65.
65.
Good. 45 to 65 for general pop. Good. What is the RDA for carbohydrate?
130 grams a day.
130 grams. What's the EAR for carbohydrate?
100 grams.
100 grams. Good job. Okay, so what's the RDA for protein?
It's 0.8 grams per kilogram of body weight.
Good job. AMDR for protein?
10 to 35.
10 to 35. Good. Fat? What's the RDA?
There isn't 35%.
Okay, so the AMDR is 20 to 35%. But what's the RDA?
It would be 30 grams?
Oh, 30 grams.
No?
Isn't there not one?
There is one, but not for fat as a whole. It's a type of fat. What fats do we need to consume? A lot of people take these every morning or night.
Omega-3 and omega-6.
Omega-36.
Good. Okay, omega-3, omega-6 have an RDA. Okay, what are they?
1.6 grams a day.
For male, and what about female?
1.1 grams a day.
And again, that was omega-3, omega-6.
Omega-3.
Okay, what about omega-6?
17 grams a day for male and then 12 grams a day for females.
All right, good job. All right, knowing those acronyms, populations, and then the actual recommendations. Ranking scaling index for carbohydrates and protein. We've already brought this up with carbohydrate. We got glycemic index, right? How quickly that carbohydrate turns to glucose in the blood. Okay. We also have, what else do we have? You tell me. What goes along with the glycemic index?
Glycemic load.
Glycemic load. How much you're consuming, not just how quickly, but how quickly. Okay, the load. Okay, what about protein? How do we rank that?
How many proteins in 100 gram?
It's to do with the nitrogen in it. It's its biological value. Okay, so we have a biological value of how much nitrogen really is in this protein source. Okay, and then we have one other way that we look at protein sources. Anyone remember?
PDCAs?
Yeah, PDCAAs. So that's that protein digestibility amino acid score. So this looks at how much fiber is in it really. How digestible is it? And so this is a score from 0 to 1, or just 1 being very available to you, and lower than 1 being more fiber content, less chance you can absorb 100% of that amino acid content. Okay, talking about amino acids, how many are there?
20.
20.
How many essential?
9.
9.
Non-essential.
11.
11.
How many branched chain amino acids are there?
3.
What are they?
Isoleucine, leucine, and valine.
Good. Isoleucine, leucine, valine. What contributes a complete protein?
A full amino acid profile.
Has all the essential, not all 20. It just has to have all 9 essential to be complete. Okay. Protein synthesis. There isn't many questions on this, but that's that role of, I've already brought it up. Once an amino acid gets an instruction from the DNA, that's that subsequent forming of a new protein, a new peptide. So that's the messenger RNA transcribing that those amino acids in the side of ribosome, and you translate those one by one into a new protein source. Okay. Exercise adaptations. With this, I want to know, at what intensity do you switch from being aerobic like you are right now to being anaerobic if the intensity increases?
5%.
Around 55%, yeah? And it for males or females, does it go higher or lower?
For females, higher.
Yeah, a little bit higher for females. They have a tendency to want to hold on and use that fat a little longer, and then they'll use the sugar when the intensity gets even higher up there. Okay, one thing we haven't yet, hormones, right? Yeah, let's cover our hormones. What hormones have we talked about so far in this class?
Insulin.
Insulin, good. Insulin comes from where? Comes from pancreas, good.
Pancreas.
Yep, and what does insulin do?
Help bring glucose into cell.
Yeah, it's anabolic. It helps uptake those glucose from the blood into the cells of your body. Okay, what's another hormone we've talked about in this class?
Cholesterol.
Cholesterol forms hormones. It isn't a hormone in its own right. Another
The
one.
glucagon.
Glucagon, good job. So glucagon is the opposite of insulin, basically. It comes from the pancreas still, just like insulin does. Insulin comes from the beta cells, glucagon comes from the alpha cells. And insulin removes blood sugar from the blood, or glucose from the blood, and puts it into storage. Glucagon does the opposite. It releases storage and helps release energy. Okay, catabolic helps put glucose into the blood. So if you're low blood sugar, glucagon's a hormone that's going to be released to say, I need more sugar. Okay, what other hormones are there?
Testosterone.
There are, you're absolutely right, but we haven't really covered testosterone in this class.
Mm.
So what ones have we covered?
Epinephrine and norepinephrine.
Good. Epinephrine, norepinephrine. What do these do? Where do they come from?
Central nervous system.
They stimulate your central nervous system, right? They help you do that fight or flight. They help you increase your heart rate. They help you respond to stimuli in your environment. So whether you're exercising and you need to start warming up, getting sweat going, getting heart rate up, getting breathing rate up, that's the role of that adrenaline, right? They come from the adrenal glands. Epinephrine, norepinephrine, also known across different countries as just your adrenals, your adrenaline. Okay, last hormone that we've talked about in this class also comes from the adrenal gland. It is catabolic. It's high at night, highest when you wake up in the morning.
Melatonin.
Growth hormone.
It's cortisol.
Oh,
Cortisol. So cortisol is that stress hormone that whenever you're under high stress starts to increase. Okay, now that could be stress in your life, but the reason we see it highest in the morning is because you've gone maybe 8 hours without eating. And remember that's a stressful thing for the body to do. Okay, so we start releasing a hormone that breaks down storage energy. So cortisol is catabolic. It breaks down storage energy, releases it for our body to use so that we aren't stressed. It's a stress hormone that helps to keep us in homeostasis. Try to look through if there's anything we haven't touched on. What's your BMR? Anyone remember what BMR or RMR is?
yeah, it's the energy used for survival.
So what I was going for there is your basal metabolic rate or resting metabolic rate. And we've talked about this when we talk about energy systems, and we even talked a little bit about COVID, and when you're struggling to breathe, struggling to get oxygen in, it's hard to produce energy in the aerobic system. And so your basal metabolic rate is the minimum amount of energy you need to sustain life. So that's kind of what they put people on when they put them on a ventilator and sedate them, and they put them into like an induced coma. They are trying to get their energy levels as close to basal metabolic rate as possible, as low as possible to sustain life, keep the body alive, but not expend any more energy than that. And resting metabolic rate is similar, but it's just stay still, stay at rest. Okay, it doesn't quite require all the procedures to have minimal energy to maintain life. It's just, what do you do if you were just to lay in bed all day and not do anything? Resting metabolic rate. Okay, that's a good list. What questions do we have? I've got some in the chat here. Let me have a look.
What's the test layout going to be like?
Like the test format, did you say?
Yeah, like is it short answers, multiple choice.
Yep, it's all multiple choice on Blackboard, okay? So you're gonna come in, make sure everyone is bringing an electronic device to class, okay? You need a laptop. I did bring this up in the first class. Everyone said they will have the ability to get one of those so that you can take this exam. You'll pull up your Blackboard, an exam will become present in your assignment area on Blackboard within nutrition, and then you'll just take it. As soon as you're done, you leave.
Is the test open notebook or is it just like based off memory?
It's all memory. Yeah, you can't have any open text. Okay, so I'll walk around and make sure no one's got multiple tabs open.
Is it the whole class period we have for it?
You do, yep. Unless you have additional time, which has already been worked out with me. Yeah, you have the 60 minutes to complete it, but I assure you, most of you will not take that long.
How many questions are there?
That is a good question. Let me see what I can find out for you real quick. Fifty questions, 2 points each.
Thanks.
Yeah, 50 multiple choice questions.
Did you say there was a time limit of 60 minutes?
60-minute time limit, yep.
Also, are we gonna find this recorded lecture somewhere on Blackboard?
Yep, I'm going to hit stop on this recording as soon as you guys are done asking me questions, and I will upload that to my YouTube channel, and then I'll link it to Blackboard so that you can see it in our announcement page.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, I'm going to stop the share now. We're back to the normal discussion. Last chance, any further comments? All right, recording is stopped.